Before esports arenas, before 4K graphics and billion-dollar franchises, there was a time when gaming was raw, imaginative, and powered by just 64 kilobytes of memory. The Commodore 64 wasn't built as a game console, but it became one of the greatest gaming machines of all time, by accident, passion, and sheer creativity. This is the story of how the Commodore 64 redefined what games could be, and how a humble home computer became the unlikely king of 8-bit gaming.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
The story traces back to January 1981 when MOS Technology, Commodore's integrated circuit design subsidiary, initiated a project that would change everything. The genesis of the Commodore 64 emerged from Commodore's previous successes with the PET computer line and the VIC-20, which had already established the company's reputation for delivering capable computers at prices that challenged traditional industry standards. Some of Commodore's top engineers knew their computers were falling behind. They felt like Commodore needed to shake things up if they wanted to stay ahead. Together, they went to Commodore's tough-as-nails CEO, Jack Tramiel, with a bold idea: a powerful but affordable computer to replace the VIC-20 and take gaming and home computing to the next level. Tramiel, known for his aggressive business philosophy, made a decisive mandate that would define the project's scope. The machine must feature 64 kilobytes of random access memory. That plan sounded pretty wild at the time, especially since 64K memory chips were super expensive, sometimes costing over $100 each. Turns out, Jack Tramiel's gamble paid off. He had a hunch that memory prices would drop soon, and he was right. That gave Commodore a huge advantage. Since they owned their own chip factory, the team could build and test parts quickly without waiting on outside companies. By November 1981, they had finished both major custom chips, the VIC-II for graphics and the SID chip for sound. The VIC-II brought smooth scrolling and colorful visuals, while the SID delivered music and effects like nothing anyone had heard from a home computer before. Initially codenamed the VIC-40 as the VIC-20's successor. The project utilized identical cases and motherboard dimensions while incorporating dramatically enhanced internal components. The team implemented Commodore BASIC 2.0 in ROM, appearing immediately upon startup with the familiar Ready prompt. When it was time to show off the new machine at the January 1982 Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the team gave it its official name, the Commodore 64. The machine's public debut created immediate industry sensation, as production engineer David A. Zimbicki later recalled. All we saw at our booth were Atari people with their mouths dropping open, saying, "How can you do that for $595? The answer lay in Commodore's vertical integration strategy, with each C64 carrying an estimated production cost of merely $135. The C64's technical specifications represented a quantum leap forward in affordable computing power. The system featured an 8-bit MOS technology 6510 microprocessor, essentially a modified 6502 with integrated input-output capabilities and specialized banking functions. This processor operated at 1.02 MHz for NTSC systems and 0.98 MHz for PAL variants, providing sufficient computational power for sophisticated software applications. The machine's memory architecture allocated 64 kilobytes of dynamic RAM for general use, with 38 kilobytes available for basic programming after accounting for system overhead. It could show 16 colors, display 40 by 25 characters on screen, and supported two main graphics modes, a high-res 320 by 200 mode and a multicolor 160 by 200 mode. It gave games and programs a sharp, colorful look that stood out in the early 80s. One of the C64's coolest features was its sprite system. It could handle 8 hardware sprites per scan line, which meant smooth, fast-moving characters and objects on screen, without slowing things down. Sprites could be resized, use multiple colors, and even detect collisions, making games look and feel way ahead of their time. The C64's initial retail price of $595 positioned it aggressively against established competitors. Commodore's pricing strategy became even more dramatic through 1983, with the company offering $100 rebates for trading in competing video game consoles or computers. This promotion enabled customers to acquire a Commodore 64 for $300, representing extraordinary value when Apple II systems exceeded $1,200 and Atari 800 computers cost $899. By 1983, the C64 achieved remarkable market penetration, capturing between 30 and 40% of the United States computer market while maintaining sales volumes of 2 million units annually. Sam Tramiel, son of Commodore's founder and later president of Atari, reflected on this period in a 1989 interview. "When I was at Commodore, we were building 400,000 C64s a month for a couple of years. The C64's impact extended beyond mere sales figures into fundamental market transformation. Unlike previous computers sold exclusively through specialized electronics stores, Commodore distributed the C64 through department stores, discount retailers, toy stores, and college bookstores. This mass-market approach democratized computer access, bringing sophisticated technology into mainstream retail environments where families could discover computing possibilities alongside traditional consumer goods. The C64 came with a built-in RF modulator, so you could plug it straight into a regular TV. No need to buy a fancy monitor. That made it way more affordable for families. It fit right in with Tramiel's mission: computers for the masses, not the classes. Powerful tech that regular people could actually afford. Early software development flourished as programmers discovered the C64's capabilities. The combination of accessible basic programming, sophisticated graphics, and professional quality audio attracted developers who recognized the platform's potential for both entertainment and productivity applications. As 1983 rolled on, the C64's library exploded. In total, around 10,000 commercial programs would eventually be released, everything from games to educational tools and serious productivity apps. You had word processors like EasyScript and Paperclip, spreadsheets like CalcResult, and even programming tools like Simon's Basic and Commodore 64 Macro Assembler. On the learning side, there were educational titles like Math Blaster and Typing Tutor. But of course, the biggest hit was gaming. Titles like The Last Ninja, Elite, Maniac Mansion, California Games, and Boulder Dash turned the C64 into a legit rival to game consoles like the Atari 2600 and even the NES. The C64 wasn't just a computer, it was the all-in-one machine for playing, learning, creating, and hacking. In 1983, the C64's rise to the top sped up fast. Thanks to a bold move by Commodore, Jack Tramiel launched an aggressive price drop, cutting $200 off the C64's list price just 2 months after it hit the market. By June, the computer was selling for as little as $300, and some stores even offered it for $199. Commodore was determined to flood the market and push out the competition, and this move made the C64 nearly impossible to ignore. The casualties mounted quickly. One of the first major players to stumble was Texas Instruments. They tried to keep up by dropping the price of their TI 9948 at just $99. But while Commodore still managed to turn a profit, TI was losing money fast. For Jack Tramiel, this wasn't just business. It was personal. Back in the 70s, Texas Instruments had nearly put Commodore out of business during the calculator wars. So when TI announced they were pulling out of the home computer market in October 1983, a lot of people saw it as Tramiel finally getting his payback. Commodore's vertical integration through MOS technology provided the crucial advantage that enabled sustained price reductions. While competitors purchased components from external suppliers at market rates, Commodore manufactured critical chips at cost, creating insurmountable pricing advantages. The Timex Sinclair Corporation became another victim of this strategy. departing the computer market within a year after Commodore's promotional campaigns effectively rendered their products commercially unviable. In mid-1984, a key moment happened at the Origins Game Fair. Big names in game development got together and agreed on one thing. The Commodore 64 was the platform to focus on. It had become the hottest market for game developers. By 1985, around 60 to 70% of all C64 software was made up of games. Even though the machine could do a lot more, it was clear. The C64 had become known first and foremost as a gaming powerhouse. Even Computer Gaming World was talking about how much the industry had shifted. They pointed out that companies like Epix had survived the video game crash mainly because they jumped on the Commodore 64 early on. Other developers were seeing the same trend. Strategic Software, for example, made over 35% of their revenue in 1986 just from Commodore 64 versions of their games, more than they made from Apple II. As Alan Miller from Accolade put it simply, it will sell the most on that system. That's why everyone was developing for the C64. Educational applications gained prominence as parents recognized the C64's potential for computer literacy development. The built-in Commodore BASIC 2.0 provided immediate programming capabilities, enabling children to learn fundamental computing concepts through hands-on experimentation. Typing tutorial programs like MasterType helped develop keyboard skills, while educational games such as Number Munchers, Fraction Fever, and Reader Rabbit made learning interactive and engaging. By early 1985, the C64's retail price reached $149 with estimated production costs between $35 to $50, maintaining industry standard markup ratios of 2 to 3 times manufacturing expense. Commodore sold approximately 1 million units during 1985, achieving a cumulative total of 3.5 million by mid-1986. Despite repeated corporate attempts to discontinue the C64 in favor of more expensive systems like the Commodore 128, consumer demand remained robust, forcing continued production. In 1986, Commodore released the 64C, a clear sign that the C64 wasn't going anywhere. It had a fresh new look that matched the style of the newer Commodore 128, but under the hood, it was still the same reliable C64, fully compatible with everything that came before. Competition from 16-bit systems and IBM PC compatibles intensified during the latter half of the 80s. Yet the C64 maintained remarkable staying power. Even major software companies like Sierra and Broderbund, who had largely bypassed the C64 in favor of Apple and PC-compatible platforms, eventually developed titles for the system as its installed base continued expanding. The C64's unique combination of affordability, capability, and software availability created a self-reinforcing cycle that sustained commercial viability far beyond initial expectations. The period from 1983 through 1987 represented the C64's golden age, but times were changing. The Nintendo Entertainment System's explosive popularity fundamentally altered the gaming landscape, selling 7 million units in 1988 alone, nearly matching the C64's first 5 years of sales. Trip Hawkins reinforced the generational transition, declaring Nintendo the last hurrah of the 8-bit world. Strategic Software acknowledged this reality by exiting the Commodore 64 market in 1991, following most competitors who had already abandoned the platform. Ultima 6, released in 1991, marked the final major C64 game from a North American developer, while The Simpsons, published by Ultra Games, represented the last significant arcade conversion. European developers sustained longer development cycles due to different market dynamics, with cassette distribution remaining prevalent and smaller budgets enabling games that fit entirely within the computer's memory without requiring multi-loading sequences. European programmers consistently exploited advanced C64 hardware features more extensively than their American counterparts, creating technically superior demonstrations of the system's capabilities. The Commodore 64 Light Fantastic Pack, released for the 1989 Christmas season, exemplified late-stage hardware innovation attempts. This bundle included a Commodore 64C computer, Cheetah Defender 64 light gun, along with compatible games developed specifically for the package. Mindscape contributed several titles designed to showcase the light gun peripheral, though the package failed to generate significant market interest. In its final years, the C64 pushed its hardware to the limit. Just look at Mayhem in Monsterland, released in 1993. Built by two brothers at Apex Computer Productions, it looked and felt so polished that people seriously thought it could have been a 16-bit console game. The colors, the speed, the music. It was the kind of technical magic no one expected from an 8-bit system that came out in 1982. Games like Chuck Rock from Core Design and Creatures 2 Torture Trouble by Thalamus in 1992 also raised the bar, showing off smooth animations and detailed graphics far beyond what early C64 games could manage. Compare those to launch-era titles like Wizard or The Blade of Blackpool, and the evolution is obvious. But it wasn't just about better graphics. Some C64 games were ahead of their time in what they let players do. Electronic Arts released the Construction Set series, which included tools like Pinball Construction Set, Racing Destruction Set, Adventure Construction Set, and Mail Order Monsters. These games let players build and customize their own experiences, a concept that would later power entire genres in games like Minecraft and Roblox. Across its life, the C64 had hits in nearly every genre. Strategy fans loved Archon and Mule, arcade-style gamers had Impossible Mission and Boulder Dash, and platformer fans couldn't get enough of the great Gianna Sisters, Commando, or Last Ninja. IK Plus brought fast-paced martial arts to the screen, while Maniac Mansion from Lucasfilm Games introduced a whole new style of storytelling with point-and-click adventure gameplay. And for those who love deep hours-long adventures, the C64 delivered some of the best RPGs of the era, each offering rich worlds and long-form gameplay that kept players hooked for weeks. Sim fans had their share of classics too. The space-trading epic Elite pushed boundaries with its open-ended universe, and Will Wright's SimCity gave players a terrain editor right out of the box, something you didn't see in most other versions at the time. One thing that really set the Commodore 64 apart was its built-in speech synthesis. No extra hardware needed. While most other systems needed expensive add-ons to talk, the C64 was already doing it just by itself. Some games made great use of this. Impossible Mission kicked things off with that iconic line, "Stay a while, stay forever." A quote burned into the memory of every Commodore 64 gamer. Other titles like Kennedy Approach, a 1985 air traffic control sim, had voices calling out actual flight instructions. Beachhead 2, The Dictator Strikes Back, Jump Jet, and the Ghostbusters game all added voice clips that brought a new level of immersion. And then there was Transformers: Battle to Save the Earth in 1986. It packed an entire narrated intro onto one side of a floppy disk, which was mind-blowing at the time. In late 1985, the C64 took another big leap with the launch of Quantum Link, or Q-Link for short, a groundbreaking online service made just for Commodore users. Long before the internet became mainstream, Q-Link let people connect through their computers for chat, email, news, and even multiplayer games. One of its most innovative features was Club Carib, originally known as Habitat from Lucasfilm Games. It was way ahead of its time. A virtual world where players could walk around as avatars, chat with others, trade items, and explore together. In a way, it was an early version of what we now think of as online multiplayer, or even MMOs. Q-Link ran until 1994. And over time it evolved and rebranded, eventually becoming a little company you might have heard of, America Online. Collectible value for C64 items has skyrocketed in recent decades. Gold-plated Commodore 64 units, presented as promotional awards to top salespeople and VIPs, command $5,000 to $20,000 or more depending on provenance. Factory-sealed original bread bin-style C64 computers achieve $300 to $2,000, particularly early production models. Rare game cartridges represent the most volatile collectible category. Ultima, Escape from Mount Drash, arguably constitutes the holy grail of C64 collecting, with authentic copies potentially worth thousands. Rare first prints of the Attack of the Mutant Camels, early Epic's California Games editions, and limited-run Metal Gear US releases command substantial premiums from dedicated collectors. The machine's final demise arrived in March 1994 when Commodore announced at CeBIT, in Hanover, Germany, that C64 production would cease in 1995. The decision resulted not from declining demand or unprofitable hardware sales, but because the Commodore 1541 disk drive cost more to manufacture than the computer itself. 1 month later, Commodore filed for bankruptcy, ending the C64's remarkable 11-year production run. Commodore's sales records show that around 12.5 million C64 units were sold worldwide, a massive number that made it the third most popular computing platform well into the 21st century. It held that spot until 2017, when the Raspberry Pi family finally overtook it. You might hear bigger numbers floating around, like 17, 22, or even 30 million, but there's no solid proof to back those up. Still, with that confirmed 12.5 million, the C64 holds the title as the best-selling single computer model in history. Modern nostalgia for the Commodore 64 materialized in 2018, with the release of the C64 Mini, an unofficial Linux-based console designed by British company Retro Games, who licensed the name from Dutch-based Commodore corporation BV. This decorative half-scale replica featured 2 USB ports, 1 HDMI port, and mini USB power connection, though its keyboard remained non-functional, requiring control through and included the C64 joystick or separate USB keyboard. The system utilized the X64 emulator as part of VIC to run software, and supported loading new ROM files alongside its built-in graphical operating system. The full-size C64 followed in 2019 for Europe and Australia, with North American release scheduled for November 2020, featuring a completely functional keyboard built to original C64 scale, and enhanced capabilities including VIC-II emulation, 4 USB ports, and an upgraded joystick. Neither product carried official Commodore trademarks, with the original Commodore key replaced by a C64 key, though system ROMs were properly licensed from Cloanto Corporation. Both consoles offer dual operational modes, carousel mode for accessing built-in game libraries and classic mode for traditional C64 operation, with USB storage supporting disk, cartridge, and tape image files for expanded functionality. The Commodore 64's legacy isn't just about numbers, it changed the culture around computers. What started as a bold engineering project became a global phenomenon that brought technology into millions of homes. With smart design, low pricing, and massive reach, the C64 reshaped the industry and showed the world what personal computing could really be. Thanks for joining me through the history of this legendary machine. If there is any interesting gaming phenomena you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss more videos like this one.